Okay. Hello, ladies. I am Shanna Bradley. I am the founder and CEO of Global Birth Community. So I just am excited to just meet with you ladies today, go over a few things, share my heart and kind of my doula journey and what I've seen a lot of students' journey look like, and then answer your questions and help you in whatever way I can. So I guess really helping to doula the doula. Because yeah, there's a lot of questions. I had so many questions when I started, and different programs, like what do different things mean? And so I just want to be here to help you guys navigate that and help you kind of figure out some of that if you guys have questions, because I know it can be really overwhelming. So I am going to just share my screen, see if I can get this to work today. Um, we've kind of been on Christmas, we've kind of been on like a holiday break. And so I have not taught in a while. So I feel like I don't remember what Zoom is like sometimes. All right. Can you all see that?
Yep, it's on there.
Okay, perfect. So, becoming a doula. So you want to become a doula, and like I said, I'm Shanna, and I want to share a little bit about me. But it's really a time for you guys to ask questions and kind of pick the brain of someone who's been doing this for a while. So, a little bit about my story. I'm going to move you guys over a little bit. Um, So I was young. I graduated high school at 17, got married at 18, and I started having babies when I was 19. I was about to be 20 when he was born, but my husband joined the military, and so we got pregnant right before he left, and he was gone most of the pregnancy, and then I had to move like 8 hours away to a place that I didn't know anyone, and finish pregnancy out there. And so I was young and I thought you just go into a hospital and you have a baby and it's all great and like there's nothing you have to do for it. It's just you just do it, right? And it was a really traumatic birth, and yeah, I didn't even realize how traumatic it was until 2 years later we had our second baby, and that was really boring, and it wasn't traumatic, and it was just a local hospital to where we lived, and it was just very different. And at this point, I was already an EMT, and so I was in the medical field, and I was just like, what made these two births so different? And when I had a really regular birth, I was like, wow, that was even more traumatic than I thought, because I didn't even realize it didn't have to be like that. And so that really got my brain thinking, like, why was this so different? And I started to look into birth in America, and just started going down that rabbit hole. And it was several years later before I became a doula. Actually, I became a doula when we were pregnant with our fifth. Is that right? Yes. And so had several different kinds of birth experiences along the way. But I really find that most doulas fall into one of two categories. So they either had a really traumatic birth and they don't want anyone else to have a birth like that, or they had a beautiful, perfect birth and they want everyone to have a birth like that. And then there's a small percentage of women who have not had babies yet or aren't having babies, and they just have experienced birth in a way that they just want to be a part of that to support other women. So I've definitely trained a lot of homeschool girls or young girls right out of high school who have experienced birth through seeing a sibling being born, or a cousin or a niece or nephew or whatever that is, and they've experienced birth generally in a really positive way and want to come alongside and support. So I wanted to ask you ladies if you wanted to come off mute and just share, do you fall into a traumatic birth, a non-traumatic birth, a very beautiful birth, or experienced it in a different way and just wanting to come alongside women? So if anybody wants to share.
Yeah, I can share. I can start. So I actually don't have any kids. Sorry, my camera's off. I actually don't have any kids, but I just love children. I've been a babysitter since I was a child, pretty much. And yeah, I just have a passion for birth and for advocating for mothers and just really playing out that like female servant aspect of being a doula. So yeah,
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
of course.
I can go next.
Okay.
I'm Joe. I just had my first baby 3 months ago, and that experience definitely has pushed me in this direction. But it was a really good birth, but a hard pregnancy because I didn't have what I needed for support. Yeah, so that's made me want to go out and try to help others learn what I learned and hopefully have the good experience I did have.
Awesome. Yeah.
Hi, for me, I don't have any children, and I've never witnessed a birth in person, but I just find it to be a very beautiful process, and I'm just excited to be a part of that.
Awesome. Can you think of a time that like got you interested in birth or like something specific of you were so old and that's just when you kind of knew?
I think when I was in high school, I volunteered at a labor and delivery center in the hospital, and that we interacted with the newborns and shadowed some of the nurses. So I think it was there, perhaps that yeah, kind of started it.
That's a really cool opportunity in high school. I've
It
never
was
heard
really
of that. Yeah,
fun.
awesome. Was that through school then?
I can't really remember.
Okay.
Um, I don't remember where I heard about it, but no, it wasn't through school.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, normally they don't let people into, birth and labor and delivery or postpartum or babies. Like they used to a long time ago. It's just they just don't really, it's kind of shut off. So to be able
Yeah.
to do that is so cool. What state are you in?
Missouri.
Okay, awesome. I was just talking to a midwife who just moved here from there, and she was just saying, um, just how different the birth laws and community are there versus here. And I was like, that's so interesting. I haven't ever heard anyone, really share about that state. And I'm like, now I'm really intrigued because it sounds like you have great midwifery laws for home birth midwives. So, but yeah, awesome. Anybody else want to share?
I can share too. I just don't know how to get my camera to work on here. It's not working.
Gotcha.
This is my husband's laptop, so I'm not sure how to do that. I have two beautiful boys. I had C-sections with both of them. The first one was an emergency, and I just opted for one the second time, just because I didn't want to have to go through, that traumatic experience again, because it was really hard on my body the first time, and I didn't want to have to do that and take care of my toddler. So, um, yeah, I guess that really just kind of got me interested, and also the lack of care I guess I had postpartum, especially with the C-section kind of going through that. So I guess I kind of just want to be that for women, especially in the postpartum part of it.
And what was your name?
Bailey.
Bailey. Okay, awesome. Yeah. And so you get that whole perspective too, as far as like supporting C-section moms and what that looks like. And we had one baby spend only 2 days, but it felt like forever. 2 days postpartum in the NICU. And having that experience, I'm like, okay, whole new experience of being able to support NICU moms because that was not at all what I thought it would be. And yeah, so it definitely brings, a different perspective of supporting not just C-section moms, but VBAC moms and things like that. So yeah, thanks for sharing, ladies. I don't think is there anyone else? I don't think so. Okay. So what are the difference in doulas? So one of you mentioned it. So doula comes from the Greek word doulos, which is servant, and doula is female servant. And so there was archaeologists and they came across drawings of women supporting women and not really in a medical way. And so they're like, what do we call this woman who's supporting a woman during labor and birth? And so they went back to the Greek and found doulo and doulos. And so they're like, okay, so a woman serving a woman is a doula. And so they kind of coined that phrase, which is funny that it was archaeologists who did that. And then and that was like kind of early 60s, I think, maybe late 50s. And then in the late 60s, DONA, which is Doulas of North America, became an organization and they really started to I guess tell or explain what a doula was in America. And so that's really been yeah, that's it's kind of where the word doula comes from, but it was traditionally a woman servant or a woman serving women. And so there's birth and labor doulas, which is the same thing, birth and labor. Some organizations call it one, some call it the other, but that's really somebody who comes alongside during pregnancy, attends the birth, and then does like brief postpartum care. And then a postpartum doula comes alongside after mom gets home from the hospital and can care in multiple different ways. So they can come alongside and just help the mom and help with the house. They can help with just the newborn and never touch the house or never, touch the mom. Sometimes it's a combination. Sometimes it's like light cooking, light cleaning, light errands. Sometimes it's just a lot of lactation support. Sometimes it's night doulas or weekend doulas where you're sleeping there and you actually get up with the baby and change the baby and take the baby to the parents to feed them or feed the baby yourself and put the baby back to bed. So there's a whole lot of different ways you can be a postpartum doula. That's not as like narrowed of a description. And then bereavement and loss doulas who come alongside miscarriage, infant, stillborn, loss and things. Fertility doulas to walk alongside women who are dealing generally with infertility, but sometimes just, fertility in general. Adoption doulas, and now there's really a doula for everything. Several years ago, I had this dream, and I just thought it was really funny because I remember sharing it with my husband, but I ran into a friend at an airport. And she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a doula." And she's like, "Oh, I'm a doula too. I support dogs giving birth." And I just remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, like you've got to be kidding me." Like supporting a dog giving birth and a human are not the same thing. Anyways, I remember waking up and laughing about that. And I kid you not, and this was like probably 5, 6 years ago. The other day I talked to a woman and we weren't at the airport. But it was somebody that I knew from my past, and she's like, that's what I do. I like breed dogs. I'm a dog doula and I like care for my dogs and I attend to them when they give birth. And I was just like, uh-huh. And I got off the phone and I told my husband, I was like, it happened. I met the person who's a dog doula. So there really is all kinds of doulas. But those are some of the main ones. And then similar, like adjacent would be lactation consultants, lactation specialist, anything like that. Or adjacent to that is also childbirth educator. Do you guys have any questions about the different kinds of doulas? Okay. So being on call. So most of you don't actually, okay, yeah, most of you don't have kids. One of you do. But on call is one of two major things that people are always worried about. How do I do on call when I have kids? Because a lot of women, like I said, come into becoming a doula because of their birthing experiences. And so, yeah, when you don't have kids, for all of you who don't have kids, super easy. For the most part, because you don't have to find childcare to just up and leave. But I do find this to be hard for a lot of moms that have really little kids because it's really hard to find babysitting no matter what, let alone babysitting on like a last second, or be on call. So we homeschool. We have 6 kids that range from 19 all the way down to almost, she's like 20 months old. So we have kind of all ages. And I started birth work when, like I said, I was pregnant with our 5th. And so I always kind of had little kids and I've continued to have more kids. And so that has been difficult. So if you don't have like a mom or a sister or a really close best friend who's always available, what I suggest to a lot of people is finding a homeschooler who can drive. So a homeschool girl who can drive, who is available all weird hours. And then, if your husband's there from like, it'd be great. My husband's never had like normal hours, but if he's home from like 5 p.m. to like 8 a.m., then you have those covered. And most births happen at night, or a good part of the labor and things happen at night. But having several different babysitters that you kind of call, can be super helpful, but that can be depending on where you live and just support issues, of finding those really good on call. But I find that homeschool girls who can drive are great. They usually have a lot of experience with kids. They love to come over and they usually like pick up and clean for you. And so that's my big suggestion usually to birth workers, is getting in that homeschool community and finding a girl or two. And then being on call, if you have a normal job, can be really hard too. So what I suggest to some women who really want to do birth work, is to also do postpartum work. So postpartum work is scheduled and it's contracted out for weeks to months. And so you can schedule that. And then in your contract, you write, if I have to go attend a birth, then we will add your hours to the end of the contract. And because they just gave birth, they understand how important doula support is. So it's this one awesome job that you can just leave and they be really understanding. And so I always suggest if you want like a full-time job, you really need to have postpartum in there because postpartum is more of a stable income that you can schedule, and then also the availability to leave to go to birth. So a lot of single women or women without kids or older women who their kids have grown, a lot of grandmas, they love doing the postpartum work as well because they can schedule it and then still attend births. So yeah. And then so as far as on-call goes, you always write in your contract, and we talk about this in training, all trainings which should cover this, but you would have like a lead time. So depending on where you live, if it's like a big city or you're more rural, you would generally have like a 2 hour window or an hour and a half window or whatever that looks like, depending on your kids and how close you are to hospitals. So, the doula photographer who took this picture of me, she lives in a more rural area, more like an hour away from all of our hospitals. She has a little homestead. She's, does a little bit of everything. And so her lead time with her littles is a little farther than what mine is because I live within 10 to 15 minutes of every hospital. So, you write that into your contract to give yourself leeway to drop your kids off at somewhere or wait for someone to come. And it's generally, like I said, a couple hours. So it's not drop everything and go. And I really, through prenatals and meeting with my clients, like let them know, like, hey, let me know when you see signs of birth, and let me know when this happens in labor and all these things. So they're like keeping me posted throughout the journey before they ever need me. So I always know like hours ahead, like, when she's going to need me soon. And I'm usually sitting and waiting, like, okay, is she ready for me yet? Versus I've never had to be like, oh my gosh, like, how do I get out of here? I don't have enough time. And so yeah, you learn how to work with your clients and let them know how to keep in good communication so that it's not ever super urgent. Now you might have like a really quick birth one time, but that's not the normal. And sometimes if you have that, they know that they have quick births, and then you can be more on call than normal. But I have never missed a birth. Um, yeah, I've never missed a birth. So, any questions about being on call? I've also never caught a baby. So I've never not got my client to a hospital. So I can't, there's a lot of doulas who can't say that, who have experienced an accidental unassisted home birth. I have not. So I'm thankful for that. But so how do I know which training to choose? And so before COVID, everything was really in person. So there's an aspect to like hip squeezes and physical comfort measures and things like that to do in person. So traditionally, but pre-COVID, almost all doula training was in person, which makes sense. But really that's changed. So there's a lot of online or in person. So you really need to decide some of these things. Do you want to do online? Do you want to do in person? Some kind of have a combo. We do a combo once a year. I love in person more, I'll be honest, because it's a lot more fun to just interact and learn the things and try them on each other. Do you want a classroom approach where so we have like live classes? Or do you want an online self-paced approach where you can kind of work at it in little parts? What is the birth philosophy of the organization? So that's a big one. So ours is very missional and ministry minded, and we are a Christian faith-based organization. So ours uses traditional language. So we use mom, dad, breastfeeding, those kind of terms. And but language can be a big one for a lot of people. So the bigger organizations, a lot of them have gone to birthing person, partner, body feeding, chest feeding. And so we work with women from all communities and cultures, and we do trainings all over the world in person and online. And so part of our heart has always been to stick with that traditional language, and you'll just find that less and less. And and that's true in all the birth communities. So lactation to education to all of the things. But we do use that traditional language. So if that's important to you, make sure you find a training that sticks to that versus it's harder to find than ever before. So time frame and requirements. So most organizations require recertification. So find that out. Is there recertification every 2 years, every 3 years? And what does that cost? Because sometimes that can be a big cost every 2 to 3 years and requires things like continuing education, which can also cost. Because we train women from all communities all around the world, we do offer a lifetime membership. And we do that because we know if you love doing this work, you're going to keep learning, you're going to keep doing things. And so we're not going to force you to pay just additional fees and force you into doing extra education, because if you love doing this, you will continue to seek that. And we didn't want that barrier for the women that we train. And so our time frame is it's a flipped classroom approach. So we have lives and then we have weekly homework for the actual month of training. So birth doula training is 5 weeks and postpartum is 4 weeks. But anything you don't get done, you can do, later. But we do encourage it to be done before the next class because we go in depth on the subjects. We do activities that have to do with the subjects that you should have just covered. But you can always finish whatever you don't get done. And then things like book reports and community resource lists, like that's on your own time. So there is no expiration date, there's no time frame, but at the beginning of class, we do ask you to kind of like make your own timeline of this is when I hope to get this done and this done and this done and this done for your own personal use, and to give yourself kind of those dates. I work better under pressure and having like an end time. And so we encourage that as well, but there isn't an actual one. So once you start, you can take as long as you want. Most women take, I would say on average, 3 months. The single women who don't have kids running around and, needing to eat and all of those things, they can do it in that 1 month period. So our classes start like in January and February, but we can give you the assignments ahead of time so that you can work on those things that are outside of class and actually get them done before class even starts or during class as well. So you can't do it any less than that month, but you can take as long as you need to actually complete it and finish it. So whatever training you're looking into, see how long that is, because again, yeah, some of them have so long of a time period and then you have to pay another additional fee just to continue. So see what that looks like and what the costs are, not just for the initial training, but like I said, any additional costs for extensions or recertification as well. So what do I charge? So what is the going rate in my area? Can I do this full-time or part-time? And what do I do about childcare? So we touched on the childcare, but these are some of the big questions that I've been asked. So depending on where you live, really finding out the rates of what people in your area charge. So some doulas, birth doulas charge between like $800 all the way up to like $2,500. So if you live in a smaller town or more rural, it's going to be more of that 800 to 1,000. If you live in a bigger city or on one of the coasts, it's going to be more of that 2,500, 2,000, 2,500. And then if you live in a moderate city, it's going to be anywhere in between there. Postpartum doulas charge anywhere from about $25 to $50 an hour on average, sometimes maybe even more than that. If you live in a major city like New York or like LA, you could charge a lot more than that. But in most cities, I would say probably somewhere around that $50 range, give or take. And then if you're doing night postpartum doula training, you get to charge more. And if you're doing work on the weekends for postpartum doula training, you also charge more. So the people who make the most money are women who do postpartum night work, because you charge a premium for nights. And yeah, women love to hire doulas to stay up and be the caretaker at night. And most contracts say you can sleep when the baby's sleeping. And so if you are without kids, like you don't need to care for kids all the time, that is a great way and a good paying job, honestly. So that's the best way to get full-time work. A full-time birth doula would need to take on probably 3 to 5 clients, 4 clients on average a month, and charge a good living wage to be able to consider it full-time. But most full-time birth workers do a combination of postpartum and birth, or solely postpartum. It's just harder. It takes time, but you can do just birth. But again, it's so unpredictable that sometimes it's hard to do that. So part-time is more common, but full-time is possible. It's just depending on how you want to do it. So my why to Created to Birth was to make doula training accessible to all women in all communities and all cultures. So I see birth work as ministry. There are 3 times in a person's life when they're most open to spiritual things, and that is birth, death, and marriage. So to be able to come alongside of a woman during this sacred and special time and to care for them and provide information and advocacy and all of the things is to me ministry. And again, a time to come alongside and meet physical and spiritual needs all at the same time. So this is shortly after our youngest was born. So this is kind of my whole family right there. But I worked with immigrants and refugees for several years in ministry and supported their births, most of them the first birth that they had in America, which looked very different from their home country. And they didn't have the support, they didn't have the community, they didn't have their moms, they didn't have their sisters, they didn't have all those women that normally surround them. And so I came alongside of them and worked with an organization for several years. And then we moved back to where we're from in a different state and started our own nonprofit organization to come alongside immigrants, refugees, and teen moms. And so I run that and then also do doula training in person. So we do it locally in person once or twice a year, and then we go overseas. So we have trained some of the very first doulas in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. And then we've trained doulas that go out as community health workers in surrounding areas of Cape Town, South Africa. We've been to the Philippines and trained up some of their first doulas. And so we've had opportunities, and our students, our alumni, have the opportunity to come on these trips and train or help participate. And I've taken some different doulas who have never left the country and got to go on these trips with us and help teach and interact with these women from different communities. So, like I said, we have really a heart for missions and ministry. But I train women from multiple languages, communities, cultures, and we, as of January, will be rolling out our curriculum. We have a trainer who's bilingual, and she'll be teaching in Spanish. So we'll be offering this in Spanish, and then hopefully other languages in the future as well. So that's really been a big part of making this accessible. And so we do offer different scholarships for ministry and missionaries. And I've trained a lot of missionaries in a lot of closed countries to be able to support women in this way. And it's been quite an opportunity for them within their own communities. So, what are your questions? I know Joe had some questions, and I hope I hit some of them, but I feel like there's probably one or two that I did not get to. So, what are your ladies' questions?
I can go first. I have a few questions.
Okay.
So my first question, because I've done doula training, so like a lot of the hands-on doula work that you're talking about, like the hip squeeze and just like comfort measures.
Mhm.
I've done that. I've just haven't been certified. So I was looking at the cross certification on your page, and my heart really is for postpartum care. So I was just wondering like how that worked, if my doula training could like kind of come into that and play into that, and I could be certified through you as like a birth doula and a postpartum doula, or just like how that would work.
Yeah. So, if you've already done birth, then you could cross train for birth, and then you would need to take the postpartum training separate.
Okay,
Does that make
perfect.
sense? Okay.
And the cross training, like what does that look like? Like would it be like a test, like an assessment, just like of my
Yeah.
knowledge?
So we have a self-paced one, or we do an in-person, well, I guess it's a live event. So we're doing a live event in January where we will do a 4-hour training, and it's basically what you would do if you do self-paced. It's just interactive. So we go over the ministry of birth work, we go over business of birth work, we go over um like those are the two big ones. We go over some positioning and hands-on techniques. We hit all of the big major things that we want to make sure that you have covered. And then you have like a letter that you write about past doula experience and work, or you write it on a favorite doula topic. So a short research paper, or kind of a research or a story of, kind of about your birth work and how you've gotten here and what that's looked like for you. And then you would submit your community resource list and then your proof of training.
So if I already did the training and I have the proof of training, like that hands-on, like what you're saying,
Yeah.
through another organization, could I just submit all the other things needed and then do the postpartum training?
You would still have to do the live or take, oh, the other thing we do is bloodborne pathogen training. So you either do the live or you could take those like whatever 4 classes they are. You would just do them on the online portal.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
And then I was curious how much the scholarship was for?
Yeah. So if you do both together, we do offer a scholarship that makes both classes together $6.99, and then an individual class, if you only do one, would be $3.99.
Okay, perfect. And then lastly,
Yeah.
sorry guys, I don't want to take up all the time. Do you do certification for childbirth education?
We are working on it and we should have it. We will have a lactation. We have an IBCLC working on curriculum right now. And she does international missions too. She's awesome and amazing. And I've taken classes with her, but I finally got her to like sit down and find time in her crazy schedule because she works full time and runs a whole program at a hospital. But she is working on the curriculum and we will have a lactation next year. And then we'll have a childbirth educator next year as well.
Okay, perfect. Those are my only two questions as of right now, I think.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're actually moving to the Philippines in a few weeks, and I will be finishing midwifery school and working at a birth center there for the next couple of years. But we'll still teach, we'll still do trainings, but we're also bringing in other trainers and bringing in lactation and all of that as well. And so I just have to get up early to be able to do the training. But we will continue to do training. It'll just be for me a very different time zone. But yeah, we just continue to grow, and the Lord's just been able to bring people to make that happen. And yeah, so what other questions do you guys have?
I have some questions.
Yeah.
You answered some of them, but so the certification, how does it differ with your training as opposed to like the DONA certified,
Yeah.
thing?
So each different group or organization has a certification, but as far as the requirements, they're pretty similar across most organizations. What we do is ours is a little different in the sense of we don't have as many books and we don't have as many papers and we don't have certifying births. And the reason for that is COVID and international. So when COVID happened, you really couldn't get into a hospital unless you had a certification. So how do you get your certifying births if you can't get into a hospital? So then you can only do home births, and that's not accessible to everyone. And really, this is an educational program to give you the confidence to go out there and do it. So there was no reason to make you do births to be able to prove that you can support birth. So we don't require those, but DONA does. And we don't have as many books and papers because they really have a very high academic um, component to their organization, which is great, except it's not very good cross-culturally. So when English is not your first language, the academic level of like a university work is very unattainable for women outside the US or, developing countries. So we don't require that either. But as far as like time of learning and the skills you learn and all of that, it is the same.
Okay.
And then
And
we
then
add in bloodborne pathogen training, which they don't require, which is really making sure that you keep yourself safe from, blood and bodily fluids and all of those things so that you don't catch anything, you don't take anything home to your family, that sort of thing, of just being safe in that aspect. And that's generally not a requirement. It's this really short training that we require, but we think it's really helpful, especially for women who have never been in a healthcare setting, to just know those things to keep them safe. But yeah, so those are the differences.
okay, awesome. And then in terms of the training itself, do you go over any information that's like on holistic nutrition and supplements? I know we're not supposed to give advice on medical things,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, so we're actually working with somebody who is helping us build that out right now as well. So he has been doing this for a really long time and he's developing something just for our students. So we've touched on it a little bit, but this year we'll actually have he'll have his own little class that he provides for that, which I'm super excited about. So
So that starts as soon as January?
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And then what about I think my last question is related to business,
Yeah.
like running that. We're doing it on our own. So does the course go over anything like that with how to help?
So the last class for birth is all about business and hands-on. So we do half the class in person is hands-on and then half is business. Sometimes we bring in marketing, website, internet marketing person, and sometimes we bring on a CPA who actually trained as a midwife and then had a bunch of kids and never worked as a midwife, but now is a CPA. So she loves working with birth workers because she understands what we do and all the things. And so when it's one, we give you a video from the other, and when it's the other, we give you a video from the other. So you get both. It's just one is live and one is recorded, but we go over business aspects and answer a bunch of questions the last class. So
Great. I think that's it.
awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, in general, is there more of a need for postpartum or birth doulas?
I would say there are birth doulas are more known and popular as far as like what is a doula. Most people think of birth, but I will say there's a bigger need for postpartum doulas because there's a lot less of them and your postpartum doula longer. So kind of. I mean, you serve a woman during pregnancy and birth, but you only see them a couple times versus postpartum doulas can get, they can work 2 to 6 to 7 days a week for 3 months plus. So like you get a lot more touch points and a longer contract and a lot more work, and you get paid a lot more as a postpartum doula. And there's just less postpartum doulas because that wasn't really a thing until a lot more recent than birth doulas in the late 60s, early 70s. So
Okay.
yeah. So what city?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Okay. I've actually
Mhm.
trained a lot of doulas there.
Oh.
But I do know from them that there is a need for postpartum doulas as well. But people do know what doulas are in St. Louis. So yeah. So that's good and bad because you don't have to educate the community, but you also then have a little more competition. So there's good and bad there because you don't have to be like, hey, I'm a doula, and then explain to them what you are. But
Yeah.
where else are you ladies from? I know I asked you in the chat and then I never read the chat. So
I'm from Kansas City.
Kansas City. Okay. I've trained actually when we went to the Philippines in March, we had a doula come from Kansas City and she had never left the country. And so it was so fun watching her like do all the things and see all the things that she'd never seen before. But yeah. Where else?
I'm in San Jose, California.
Okay. California loves birth, loves midwives, loves doulas. So yeah.
Canada.
Canada. Yes.
Yeah.
Canada is becoming more and more popular. This year I've trained, I don't know, a dozen doulas from Canada, but I've only had a couple doulas in the last couple years from Canada. And then this year, like every class has a couple from Canada. And I'm just like, what's happening? I'm not sure. But yeah, so that's awesome. Where in Canada?
Saskatchewan.
Okay.
So kind of right in the middle. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure I've trained anyone from there. Usually on one end or the other, but yeah, so awesome. What
And
other
just a
questions? Yeah.
clarification, if you do the postpartum doula training, you don't get like certification for becoming a postpartum doula. You just get like the training completion?
No, so you would be certified when you meet all the requirements. So we actually call it a postpartum doula and newborn care specialist. And the reason why is because everyone calls things different, and so it's very confusing. And because doulas can serve the mom and doulas can serve the newborn, instead of separating them, and some places make them two separate trainings, we make them the same because it's a huge overlap. And that way, if you want to work with the newborns only, you can call yourself a newborn care specialist. If you just want to work with the moms, you can call yourself a postpartum doula or any combination of that. It just doesn't make sense to like have two separate trainings because they're really not that separate. So yeah, you will be when you
Yeah,
get certified, you will be a
perfect.
postpartum
Thank you
doula, a
so
newborn
much.
care
And
specialist.
actually,
Yeah.
perfect. I love that. Yeah, and just even hearing you talk about missions is such a beautiful thing because, like you said, there's just not a lot of like Christian organizations that are teaching. And I just recently came back from a mission trip in Honduras,
Okay.
and I would just love to like do the same things that you're doing in Central America because my family's from Honduras and Mexico. And Mexico is just kind of like taking off right now. It kind of feels like the 70s of America and Mexico. So just to get like hands-on over there in the birth action would be really
Yeah.
nice too.
How do you feel about moving to Guatemala?
I would do it in a heartbeat. Wherever the Lord would call me, I
Yeah.
would go.
I have a friend and she's a nurse and she's from here and she was a birth assistant for her home birth midwife for a long time, but she's in the process of building a birth center, which is funny because she's
Mm.
not even a midwife, but she's building a birth center in the capital of Guatemala because she's worked with trafficked and sexually
Mm.
abused teens for a long time. And she sees a need for compassionate care and holistic care and like good care. And so she's in the process of doing that, but she will need doulas and she'll need midwives. And yeah. So we're actually hoping to
I
go to
love
and do a doula training. So maybe I'll take you
it.
down there and then maybe you'll end up going back. So
Yes, drag me along because
yeah.
I love to just my mom taught me Spanish very, very young. So I love to like remember that and always use it for the Lord's work too. And yeah, there's just so much need in the Central America region. So yeah, 100%. And I'm the friend slash soon to be coworker of Lizette, the lady who
Okay.
emailed
Yeah.
me. So just wanted
Awesome.
to put a
Awesome.
face to the name.
Yes. She's like, I'm gonna share it with my friend. I'm like, perfect. So yeah, it's great to know. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, I thought of something. So
Yeah.
how does the spirituality stuff come into the training? Is it just kind of like with that perspective, or do you kind of train, for that?
Yeah, so it looks really different for everybody, but I give a lot on my experience and kind of what I do and what I've learned and ways that you can integrate it. And then we do have that live conversation of, do I pick a Christian name? Do I put I'm a Christian on my website? Like, do I use that? Do I not use that? How do I interact and how do I yeah, what do I do? How do I do it? And again, it looks different depending on who you are, but there are some key things of who is it that you're serving and who are you trying to reach? And then what makes sense to be able to find that niche group of people. So I've worked with a lot of Muslims, as I work with a lot of immigrants and refugees, and they know because of my organization that I'm a believer, but like there's different levels to it, right? So if you are a believer, then you're a believer every day, all day, you know? And so you're not probably going to hide that. I hope you don't hide it. Like it should somehow come through, whether they just know that there's something very different about you. But I have a lot of opportunities to pray with Muslims because Muslims believe that we believe in the same God. So they're Allah and God, the creator, they're the same. So they're all about praying because they pray. And so where we differ is who Jesus is. And so they're totally fine with religion and things like that. I have a lot of private clients who are believers and I have a lot of private clients who aren't believers. And there's discernment in that. And then there's opportunity and there's, a lot of silent prayer. And so we do talk about that and we work that through because it looks different, depending on where you live and who you work with and, what that looks like. So, yeah. But it's not so much we do talk about some key scriptures and things, but it's not like super in depth in that sense because we do take this curriculum to places that we can't have that, if that makes sense. So, any other questions? So our next training is January. So I didn't show you this, but I'll show it to you because I made this slide, so why not, right? I only have one more, but I will show it to you. That I made it disappear. I guess I will not show it to you. Just kidding. I had one more slide that said we have training in January. So training in January is birth doula training, which is 5 weeks, and then postpartum is 4 weeks. And most of I would say 80% or so do both, and they do them back to back. Joe, you did ask, I think it was you. If you do the bundle, you don't have to do them back to back. So if you take birth in January and you're not ready to do postpartum in February, you can do postpartum the next time. And then we do have sometimes one or two students that start with postpartum and then do birth afterwards. Like you don't have to do it in that order. So if somebody wants to take one and then wait till the next time we offer it, you can do that. They don't have to be immediate back to back. But if you don't like get the bundle, so if you do birth doula training now and in like 9 months you want to take the postpartum training, you wouldn't get the discount. So if that makes sense. Okay. So yeah, January, we're 50% full for January and February. And we usually fill up a month ahead, but I know everyone's busy like doing all the Christmas things and all the Thanksgiving things. So we have a long list of people who are interested that I need to touch base back with, but we do still have availability for those two. And then we'll probably take off March because that's when I start midwifery clinicals. So we usually do birth, postpartum break, and eventually it'll be birth, postpartum lactation. So I don't know if lactation will be ready in March. If not, we'll start whenever she's ready. But yeah, and so we'll probably do birth in April, postpartum in May, take off June, and repeat. So that's generally how we do it. So yeah, awesome. Anything else?
One final question.
Yeah.
With the lactation, I know that that's like up and coming, but would that come with the certification too, or
Yes.
like also just perfect? Thank you
I'm
so
just
much.
not sure what she's calling it yet because
Yeah.
she's an IBCLC, and so she's very like specific that she thinks like everyone just throws out words.
Yeah.
So she hasn't decided or told me if it's going to be like lactation counselor, lactation
Mhm.
educator, lactation specialist, because I'm like, you tell me, I don't know what all these words
Yeah.
mean. She's like, nobody does because they just make them up. So I don't know what the landed words will be, but it will be lactation something. But yeah. And
Okay,
we do
perfect.
lactation in postpartum, but it's only, I would say, 25% of what you're doing. So it's very foundational. And that's why we're going to have something much more in depth. So,
And how long, I know that you don't like have all the answers
yeah.
yet, but how long are you kind of like expecting the lactation course to
Yeah.
be?
It's a good question. Somewhere between 20 to 45 hours. She already does a training that's 45 hours, which is the first step to becoming an IBCLC. So she doesn't think it'll be that. So probably somewhere in the 20 to 30 hour range. And then she will do the first one live, kind of like how we do our classes now. And then we will record it and then it will be self-paced after that because she's just so crazy busy that it won't
Yeah.
be something she can continue to do over and over and over. But so if it was me, I would love to like, well, I probably will attend it, but I would attend it live with Sarah so you can ask all the questions and get all of that. But yeah, if I can convince her to do it live again and again, I will. But she teaches pretty much she either does one-on-ones or she's teaching basically 40, 50 hours a week
Mhm.
as it is. So, but yeah.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
since you haven't, if you go to our website and join, like, subscribe to our email list, we usually send out 2 emails a month, but you'll know when that is coming up and all of that. So yeah,
Perfect. Thank you so much.
awesome. Anything else? Well, if it's okay, I would love to pray us out. So I'd love to pray for you ladies. And yeah, if you guys think of anything, go ahead and email me. We do a once a month Zoom call called Birthwork is a Ministry. It's a free Zoom and it's the last Tuesday of every month. We took off December because of the holidays. But the last Tuesday of every month, and it's on our website. We have somebody who does something in birth, like either a midwife or a doula or a childbirth educator or a doctor come on and just share their journey of how the Lord brought them to what they do and how they share the gospel by meeting physical and spiritual needs, whether it's in the US or in, anywhere in the world. And so that's just a good place to just come and be inspired and ask questions. So you can always, again, you can go to the website and join that too and get on that list to get those Zooms. And then we record them if you miss it and we put them on our YouTube. So you could check those out if you want to see what those are all about. But yeah. Dear Lord, I just thank you for this time. I thank you for each and every one of these ladies who are just all scattered really throughout the US and Canada. And I just thank you for bringing them here and just laying on their heart birth work and the ministry of birth work that you have for them. I pray that you just give them wisdom and discernment on where you want them to train, when you want them to train, and provide in any means that they need, whether that's childcare to do that or finances to do that, Lord. But I just thank you for them and the work that you will do through them as they support growing families who are just experiencing the growth and the miracle of birth, Lord. I just thank you for them and the things that you're going to do through them. We just thank you and praise you. Amen. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. I hope to hear from you and maybe even see you in class. So.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.